Eternals is an ambitious Marvel Cinematic Universe project with a lot of narrative heft revolving around the arcs of its various heroes. Directed by acclaimed filmmaker Chloe Zhao, this film is a 2-hour and 37-minute epic about superpowered immortal beings grappling between their duty and honor versus what is morally right. Two things that are often opposed to one another that present our heroes and heroines with both an internal and external conflict. And as a result, Eternals is a narrative with a grand sense of scale, one with morally flawed characters that adds its own spin to the Marvel superhero formula. And add an A-list cast of actors in order to present the action and drama on screen, and you have a potential game changer here. A movie that could shake up the status quo rumblings of the MCU. Unfortunately though, Eternals does not stick the landing here. In fact, I'm pretty conflicted with how I feel about the film, mostly because it is a story of halves where the first half is slow, bloated, and lacks much needed narrative momentum, and the back half is pretty good due to some solid narrative twists and some themes that I related to as a queer person. And due to both the good and the bad elements, there's truly a lot of things that work and don't work in this film. It is very uneven as far as cinematic experiences go, and honestly, I'm not 100% sure with how I feel about this film. While for sure Eternals becomes more and more worthwhile the further in you get, I'd hesitate to ever call it a good movie, and even with the bad and dull front half, I'd also be reticent to call it a bad movie because it truly does drastically improve in the back half, and on the whole, it is kind of a weird yet interesting mixed bag. To explain why this is, let's start by detailing the story. The plot follows the Eternals, who are superpowered immortal beings sent to Earth by the celestial god Arishem in order to protect humanity from the Deviants, no relation, which are mindless monsters that love to feast on human flesh, much like how I like to demolish a Portillo's Italian beef. And admittedly, this seems like a simple task for the Eternals at first. After all, protecting humanity from the Deviants is their one sole objective. But unfortunately for them, there is a catch. Because while they do live among humans and become the basis of cultural mythological figures across the world, the Eternals are commanded by Arishem to never get involved in human conflicts or impact human evolution in any meaningful way. They can only protect humans from the Deviants. That's it. And this definitely rubs many of the Eternals the wrong way. After all, they have lived amongst humans for thousands of years, and many of them have become attached to humanity over that stretch of time. They feel a connection with them, and as a result, their duty of non-interference is the crux of an internal crisis of confidence between all of the Eternals, and the super team fractures due to this, causing them all to go their separate ways when they wrongly believe that all the Deviants had been defeated. This unfortunately becomes a problem, because hundreds of years later, once we reach modernity, the Deviants have mysteriously returned and are attacking in force and pose a danger to the planet, and it is up to the Eternals to regroup and protect humanity from this existential threat. There is a lot going on here narratively, but let me just say up front that the characters and the actors are not the issue here. In fact, all the Eternals are fairly interesting and have unique power sets that allow them to stand out from one another. For a few examples, Cersei, no relation, is the moral backbone of the team and can alter matter. Athena is strong and can summon weapons but suffers an immortal version of dementia. Icarus is the lawful good Superman-style character. Sprite can summon illusions but is stuck in a childlike form. Vastus is a queer family man with a penchant for creating innovative inventions. Ajax is the cryptic leader, and oh my god, I could go on. There's a lot of characters, and for the brevity of time, I'll stop here because you get the point. Because truly, there's a lot of characters who all fulfill various narrative needs, and from that angle, the characters and star-studded cast are fine. To some extent, they work. But unfortunately, the problem here is the editing. In fact, a lot of the movie's story is told via flashbacks, and to be honest, Eternals really gets bogged down by these glimpses of the past, which is something that affects the first half of Eternals in particular. See, after an opening action sequence in London, the movie has some long, lengthy flashback sequences that completely stop the narrative pace of the movie to a dead halt. In fact, the long flashback sequences stall any form of meaningful narrative momentum that the film had going for it. And while the back half of the movie is much better and there are in-narrative reasons for all these flashbacks, this does not prevent Eternals' front half from feeling like a bloated bore of a film. It is narratively deflating. The first half of the film lacks any form of meaningful excitement as well. To be honest, the opening action sequence isn't all that great or well put together, mostly because the narrative investment here is minimal and the characters react to the Deviant threat in a lackadaisical manner. Hell, even Cersei's boy toy and Dane isn't shocked or react in any meaningful way when he discovers that his girlfriend has superpowers. And while yes, I get that people aren't exactly all that shocked when people display super abilities in the Marvel Marvel Cinematic Universe because by now it's as expected as transphobia in a BBC article, that still doesn't change how there is an absence of any sense of narrative urgency in Eternals' front half. Action-wise, the movie is just pretty flat. Admittedly though, Eternals' back half is much improved. The world building for the broader MCU is interesting, there are some good narrative twists that change the way you think about the narrative, and there's a lot of allegorical themes regarding queer identity and even abortion. Yes, really. And truly the movie vastly improves the longer it goes on. But unfortunately, the quality second half just highlights the first half's deficiencies, mostly because the film just doesn't work as a cohesive whole. If anything, it's a movie where the total sum of its parts do not equal a greater overall film, and as a result, Eternals doesn't work as a whole unit. It feels like an incomplete experience. The spotty cinematography and visual effects don't help matters here. In fact, much of the movie's visuals lack a certain pop. Sure, there are picture frame-worthy shots, and some of the natural lighting is gorgeous, but the film is visually a toss-up. Some of the colors and shots look dull and lifeless, and the action sequences are nearly indistinguishable from all the other computerized mayhem that is present across the MCU. And add on the fact that the deviants look like poorly and boring designed sludge monsters, and Eternals is visually uneven. It is inconsistent. And inconsistent is ultimately the best way to describe Eternals as a whole. Whether we are talking about the bad first half and the good second half, the choppy editing structure, the absence of narrative momentum, or the spotty visuals, Eternals is an incohesive experience. The movie is just saddled with some strong positive and negative qualities in equal measure, and sadly the film's quality stays in the middle here. And while for sure I don't think that this is the worst Marvel movie, Eternals is far removed from being a good film as well. It is overall pretty rough. See ya. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, subscribe, ring the bell, share, and leave a comment telling me what you think of Eternals or the MCU at this stage. Also, please consider contributing to my Patreon page. The link is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, especially my high-tier ones in David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.